Hey everybody, welcome back to the Daily Read Aloud with Miss Moody. We are still working on the story called The Boy on the Porch by Sharon Creech, and today we're starting on chapter 6. So here we go. At noon the next day, John said, "Marta, I don't know about all this. What are we supposed to do with the boy?" Marta stood on the back porch, watching the child trail a stick through the dirt. The beagle followed close behind, sniffing at the ground. "Marta, should I take the boy with me when I go to town?" "No, the people might come back." "What people?" "The people who left the note, the ones who said they'd be back." "But they didn't say when they'd be back, did they?" "They didn't say that." After John left for town, Marta took the boy to the barn to see the new kittens and the mother goat and her 3-month-old babes. The boy petted the animals and mimicked the kittens skittering and the goats leaping. The beagle watched from the side, intervening only when the boy got too close to the mother goat. When the boy sat in the straw, the kittens crawled over him, and the young goats butted their heads under his arms, making the child laugh. But it was a silent laugh, a laugh that you could see but not hear. It spread across his face and shook his body. It waggled his arms and legs. It was Marta who gave voice to the laugh, watching the boy. She laughed until her side ached. She laughed until the beagle crawled up into her lap and licked her face as if to taste the laugh. And as she was laughing, Marta was hoping that the boy might stay a day or two. During the 12-mile stretch into town, John's mind took as many winding turns as the narrow road. He tried to ready himself for what he might hear in town and for what he should say. Maybe he should go straight to the sheriff's office and let him know about the boy. He didn't like the sheriff much. He was a bossy man, given to poking his finger in your face as if to warn you that he knew better about everything and you'd better not waste his time. John's mind turned to Marta's face when she held the child, and when she tucked him into bed, and when she'd risen in the night to check on him. Maybe, John thought, he should first go to the general store and pick up the tone of things. Gossip found its way quickly to the general store in these small towns. Out of nowhere, he thought of jelly beans, and how he'd loved them as a child, how his father had taken him into town and let him buy a nickel's worth of jelly beans from the glass jar on the counter at the general store. Maybe, John thought, he would bring home some jelly beans for the boy. When John returned home, the farmhouse was empty. He dashed out into the yard and called for Marta. He raced to the barn calling her name, "Marta! Marta!" He didn't know what made him so anxious. Maybe the people had come for the boy. He should have stayed home with Marta. What if there was a problem? But what sort of problem? What was the matter with him? He usually wasn't a worrier. The barn was empty except for kittens bouncing over hay bales. The goats and cows were in the fenced enclosures outdoors. And then he saw them, Marta and the boy, at the far end of the enclosure, lining up bottles and cans on the fence. "John, there you are! What news? Oh, don't tell me. Please don't tell me. Listen to this." The boy raised his hands as if he were a music conductor. Then he began tapping at the bottles and cans with slender sticks. It wasn't random, reckless tapping. There was a distinct rhythm to it. Slow and soft at first, rising to a crescendo, and then falling back to beautiful calm, and then rising again. It sounded like waves at the ocean or the wind as it came across the fields and through the trees. "I taught him that," Marta said. "I was pretending to be a conductor and he put the cans up there and then, oh, I don't know, I was just tapping them." "You were pretending to be a conductor? You were tapping the cans?" "Well, don't sound so surprised, John. But how would you know how to be a—" "Oh, never mind. The boy was imitating my every move, and then he took off with it. Listen to him." The boy continued, oblivious to everything but the sounds coming from the bottles and cans. "And wait," Marta said. "Watch what he does with the ladder." Farther down the fence was a ladder, which she now dragged toward the boy. She handed the boy thicker sticks, ones John had used for stirring paint. "I taught him this," she said. The boy rapped a rhythmic tune against the wooden ladder, on the sides and the rungs, a livelier, louder rhythm, full of life and joy, like a dozen dancers dancing on a wooden floor, or a dozen drummers drumming. "You taught him that?" John asked. "Only part, just the beginning, and he makes up the rest. He's very quick to learn, John." Next, the boy's attention moved on to a bucket half full of rainwater. He dipped a stick into the bucket and swirled the water round and round. If it's bad news from town, don't tell me, John. Not yet." He rested a hand on her shoulder. "There is bad news, and there is good news." "Don't tell me the bad news, John." "The bad news is—" Marta covered her ears. "I said don't tell me." John moved her hands. "That you've got cat poo on your skirt. And the good news is that there's no news in town." Sorry, I lost my spot. "No news? No news at all?" "Well, now, take that back. There was a little news. Vernie Gossam broke his leg kicking his cow." "Serves him right, then, kicking his cow." "I brought something for the boy," John said, removing a small brown bag from his jacket pocket and opening it for Marta to see its contents. He glanced away, embarrassed. "John, don't you go filling this boy up with too many sweets." "You're one to talk. Didn't I see a batch of newly made fudge on the counter?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Go ahead now. See if he likes those jelly beans." The boy, Jacob, seemed reluctant to take the jelly beans that John offered him, but at last he held a few in his hand and stared at them. "Doesn't he know what they are?" Marta said. John reached into the bag, selected a red jelly bean, and popped it into his own mouth. He said. The boy chose a red jelly bean from his palm and placed it on his tongue. He tapped his lips twice and smiled. That night, after the boy had fallen asleep, Marta said, "I just can't imagine how anyone could drop off their child at a complete stranger's house. Can you, John? What on earth could they have been thinking?" "Maybe they had an emergency." "But why leave him here? It doesn't make a bit of sense." "He still hasn't spoken?" "Not a word out of him." "Do you think he's simply not able to speak?" "Marta, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know what to make of this boy." They'd both been puzzled by the boy's silence, and equally puzzled by the boy's inclination to rap and tap on nearly every surface, with sticks and spoons and whatever object was nearest. He tapped cups on saucers and a comb on a basin. He tapped book against book and stone against stone, and if there was no object at hand, there were always his hands and his feet patting and flicking and rapping and drumming. "Maybe it is just what boys do." "Did you do that when you were young, John?" Marta asked. "I don't think so, no. Maybe sometimes. Maybe if I had a stick." It was hard to remember himself as a boy. Sometimes it hardly seemed possible that he'd ever been a boy at all. But at other times, he still felt like he was a boy. How had that happened exactly? "John, we should stop calling him boy. It isn't right. It makes him sound, I don't know, unimportant." At that, the beagle nudged John's leg as if to say, "What about me? What about me?" "We don't have a name for our dog, do we, Marta? And he's not unimportant." "He does so have a name, Beagle." "But he is a beagle, Marta." "I know, and that's why it's a good name for him." Then boy should be a good enough thing to call a boy, John thought, but he didn't say so because as soon as he thought it, he knew it wasn't true. Boy was not a good enough thing to call a boy. "His name is Jacob, and that's what we should call him." "When do you think the people will come back for him?" "Soon, don't you think? Surely soon." John could not sleep. First, he was thinking that he should go to the sheriff's office and report the boy's arrival. But the sheriff would just make a mess of things, scaring the boy, scaring Marta. Maybe the people would come tomorrow. Maybe he should stop worrying. He was not a worrier. Why was he worrying so much? Then he thought about names. Your name is important. Your name makes a statement about you. It describes not only who you are, but who you might be. Could he, John, have been named Franklin or Carter or Richmond or Conrad? No, too formal. Dwight or Thaddeus? No. Matthew, Mark, or Luke? No. Billy, Willie, Charlie, Sammy? No, he wasn't one of those either. He was John. Solid, reliable, kind John. He wondered what Jacob was. The name was not unlike John's. He was glad of that, although he couldn't have said why. Marta was also awake. She was remembering earlier in the day when Jacob had found a piece of stiff wire fencing and was using it to tap against the stones and bottles and cans, and the sounds that emerged were so beautiful and clear and pure that it seemed as if the boy had been destined to be in this place at this time. Maybe the people would stay away a few more days. All right, guys, we have made it up to chapter 10. If you're in my Google Classroom, students, I have a question for you. You can post your answer in the comments below. But my question is, do you think the people, I think those might be his parents, do you think those people are going to come back for Jacob? Why or why not? See you tomorrow.